What happens when a powerful CEO is told to wait in economy, even though she has a first-class ticket? Can one moment of injustice change an entire company? Layla Thompson is about to face a test that will challenge everything she's worked for. Will she fight back or walk away? Stay tuned to find out how one woman's decision will reshape an airline and spark a revolution. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Layla Thompson walked through the bustling Los Angeles International Airport, feeling the familiar excitement and tension that accompanied her business trips. She was the CEO of Green Tech Solutions, a company that had grown from a small startup to a leader in renewable energy technology. Today, she was headed to San Francisco for an important conference where she would meet with industry leaders to discuss potential collaborations. The event was significant, not just for the future of her company but for the future of sustainable energy itself. As she approached the check-in counter, Layla straightened her tailored jacket, adjusted her sunglasses, and flashed a confident smile. She had worked incredibly hard to get to this point in her career, and she knew it. Being the first black female CEO of a successful tech company in a predominantly white industry was no small feat. She had faced her fair share of challenges and discrimination along the way, but she had learned how to navigate the obstacles with grace and power. Layla approached the counter where a young, male check-in agent greeted her with a professional smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I assist you today?" His tone was polite, but there was something about his expression that made her pause. It wasn't just a typical customer service smile. It was almost as if he was sizing her up. "I'm flying first class," she replied, sliding her ticket across the counter. "Seat 2A, please." The agent glanced at the ticket and typed something into the computer. He hesitated for a moment, then looked back at her with a forced smile. "I'm afraid there seems to be a small issue with your ticket," he said, his voice barely masking the unease that had crept into it. "It appears that the first-class cabin is already fully boarded. Perhaps you could wait in the economy section until we sort this out." Layla's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Excuse me. There's no issue with my ticket," she replied firmly, her voice steady but with an edge. "I booked this flight 3 months ago. Seat 2A is confirmed first class. There must be some mistake." She could feel the tension building inside her chest. She had experienced moments like this before, and they always left her with a bitter taste. Despite her success, the color of her skin often seemed to prompt these small, subtle challenges. It wasn't just about the seat or the ticket. It was the assumption that she didn't belong in spaces reserved for the elite. First class was a privilege, and it seemed that some people, like the check-in agent, had decided she didn't quite belong there. The agent fumbled with his keyboard, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand, ma'am, but there seems to be some confusion in the system. I'm sure it's just a minor glitch. Would you mind waiting in economy for now and we'll get this sorted out?" Layla stood still for a moment, her gaze unwavering. She could feel the familiar heat rising in her chest, not from anger but from frustration. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about being treated like she was invisible, like she didn't belong. It had happened before, at meetings, conferences, and even in elevators. But today was supposed to be different. She had worked too hard to let moments like this slide. "I don't think you understand," Layla said, her voice calm but firm. "I have a confirmed first-class ticket. This is not an issue with my booking. It's your system that has a problem." The check-in agent hesitated again, and Layla could see his discomfort grow. His hand shook slightly as he typed on the computer, clearly trying to find a solution. After a long pause, he looked up at her with a forced smile. "Well, ma'am, as I said, the first-class cabin is full. I'd suggest you wait in economy, and we'll let you know when we resolve the issue." Layla could feel her patience wearing thin, but she held it together. She had learned long ago that moments like these, though infuriating, were an opportunity to stand her ground. If she let this pass, it would send the message that she would tolerate being dismissed. And she wasn't about to do that. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Layla said, her voice cutting through the air like a command. The agent looked taken aback but quickly nodded, no doubt realizing that this wasn't a conversation he was going to win. After a brief exchange over the radio, Layla was introduced to Patricia Walker, the senior cabin manager. Layla had dealt with flight attendants and airline staff on countless occasions, but there was something about Patricia's approach that felt different. When Patricia arrived at the counter, she had a professional demeanor, but Layla noticed the tension in her posture, the slight hesitation before she spoke. "Good afternoon, Miss Thompson," Patricia said with a tight smile. "I understand there's an issue with your seating assignment. Is there something I can help you with?" Layla looked Patricia squarely in the eye. "Yes, there is. I'm flying first class and I'm being asked to sit in economy, which is completely unacceptable. I've shown your agent my first class ticket, and yet I'm being dismissed." Patricia's eyes flickered over to the check-in agent, who nodded quickly in confirmation. "I see," Patricia said, her voice taking on a more measured tone. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding. Our system is showing a discrepancy, but if you'll follow me, we'll try to get this sorted out as quickly as possible." Layla followed Patricia through the crowded terminal, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. The feeling of being watched, scrutinized, was all too familiar. As they passed other passengers in the lounge, she could sense their eyes on her, as if trying to piece together who she was, why she was there. It was as though her presence in the airport in the first-class section was a puzzle to them. Layla had always been used to the stairs. Growing up in Detroit, she had been raised to be proud of her accomplishments, even when others didn't always see her as worthy. She had fought for every opportunity, and now she was a CEO, a leader in the tech world. And yet here she was again, being questioned not for her achievements but for her right to occupy a space reserved for those of a certain background. As she followed Patricia to the first-class boarding gate, Layla knew that this was more than just an inconvenience. It was a moment to stand her ground, to assert her place in a world that often made it clear that women of color were not always welcomed in the spaces they had earned. But Layla had no intention of backing down. Not today. Patricia led her to a seat in the lounge, a space reserved for first-class passengers. "Please have a seat, Miss Thompson," Patricia said, her voice a bit more polite now, but still distant. Layla sat, her posture poised, and took a moment to compose herself. She pulled out her phone and glanced at the time. The meeting in San Francisco would start soon, and she didn't have time to waste on these petty obstacles. But she also knew that this moment of being overlooked, of being told to wait in the economy, was just one small battle in the much larger war she had been fighting her entire life. The fight for respect, the fight for equality, the fight for space. As she sat there, waiting for a resolution, Layla couldn't help but wonder how many other people of color had been in this very situation, told they didn't belong where they were supposed to be, simply because of their appearance. How many had backed down, accepted the status quo, and let the system continue to work against them. Layla wasn't going to be one of them. Layla sat back in the plush first-class lounge, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest as she surveyed the room. She had done everything by the book. She had earned her seat, both literally and figuratively. This was supposed to be a smooth journey, a routine part of her life as the CEO of Green Tech Solutions. Yet here she was, caught in a battle over something as trivial as a seat assignment. She knew, though, that moments like this were never just about the inconvenience. They were always about something more. Patricia Walker, the senior cabin manager, had led her to the lounge, where she was now sitting, feeling the eyes of fellow passengers on her. It was as if her mere presence in the space was a puzzle they were trying to solve, a question they didn't know how to ask. Layla knew the looks all too well. She'd spent years growing accustomed to the subtle judgments based on the color of her skin. But today, she wasn't just another passenger. She was the one in charge, and it was time to remind them of that. She watched as Patricia stood by the counter, making small talk with Kevin, the check-in agent. Layla could see their nervous glances, their quiet discussions. It was clear to her that they were unsure of how to proceed. They had no idea who they were dealing with, no understanding of the power Layla had just gained. They thought this was about a seat on a plane, but it was about to be much, much more. Layla's mind raced as she thought about the situation. She had come to LA for a reason, and that reason was bigger than any seat on a plane. Green Tech Solutions had just finalized its acquisition of Global Air Partners, the parent company of this airline, and she was now the new owner of the airline. She didn't just have a ticket to fly first class. She had a stake in how this airline was run. She had the authority to shape its future, its operations, and yes, its staffing. This moment of inconvenience at the gate was about to turn into an opportunity, one she wasn't going to miss. Layla leaned forward and pulled out her phone, dialing Marcus, her assistant, without hesitation. Marcus had been with her from the very beginning, rising through the ranks alongside her as a trusted ally. He knew her well enough to understand that when she called, it wasn't just for small talk. It was about business. "Marcus, it's Layla," she said when he answered. "Get me the latest on the airline's corporate structure. I need the names of everyone involved in today's flight, starting with the gate agent and Patricia Walker." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Marcus responded, his voice calm but sharp. "I'll get on it right away. Anything else? Connect me with Thomas Harrington at Global Air Partners. Urgently," Layla instructed. "We'll need to address this situation as soon as possible." Marcus responded with a quick affirmation, and the line went dead. Layla sat back, her eyes scanning the room again. Patricia had stepped away to speak with a colleague, but Layla could still feel the tension in the air. This was not the kind of conflict that could be solved with a simple apology. This was about respect, about recognizing the place of a black woman in a space where she was rarely seen, let alone respected. But it was also about power, about making sure that the people in charge understood who was really in control. Minutes later, Marcus texted her an update with a name list and a message that Harrington was awaiting her call. Layla wasn't surprised. He would be expecting this conversation sooner or later. As CEO of Green Tech Solutions, she was used to navigating high-stakes situations with precision and authority. But now, as the new owner of the airline, her influence stretched far beyond the boardroom. Patricia reappeared in the lounge, her expression tense. Layla could tell the woman was doing her best to remain composed, but there was a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. As much as she tried to maintain her professionalism, the situation was spiraling out of control, and that was exactly what Layla needed. Patricia walked over to Layla's seat and forced a smile. "Miss Thompson, I've spoken with our operations team, and it seems there was a misunderstanding. The system did indeed show a discrepancy with your booking, but we've now resolved the issue. If you're ready, we'll escort you to your seat in first class." Layla's gaze didn't falter. She looked Patricia directly in the eye, not moving from her seat. "There's no need to escort me anywhere," she said coolly. "I'll wait here." Patricia's smile faded, but she didn't argue. Instead, she shifted uncomfortably on her feet, her posture tightening. She had no idea what Layla was about to say next. Layla leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Patricia, I don't think you fully understand who I am," she said. "I didn't just buy a ticket for this flight. I just bought this airline." Patricia froze. The words hit her like a ton of bricks. She had no idea who Layla Thompson was, beyond being another well-dressed passenger. But now, in this moment, she was learning just how much she had misjudged Layla. "You see," Layla continued, her tone unwavering, "Green Tech Solutions, the company I lead, just finalized its acquisition of Global Air Partners. This airline, it's now under my ownership. I'm the one who makes the decisions now, not you, not the gate agent, not anyone else in this airport." There was a long silence between them. Patricia's face had drained of color as the weight of Layla's words sank in. She had been treating Layla like just another passenger, someone to be dismissed and overlooked. But now the reality was clear. Layla wasn't just a passenger, she was the boss. Layla didn't need to say anything else. The implication was clear. She was no longer just someone with a first-class ticket. She was the new owner, the person who controlled the company that ran this airline. And that reality was just beginning to dawn on Patricia and the rest of the staff. Patricia quickly recovered, though, attempting to regain control of the situation. I wasn't aware of this, Miss Thompson." "I apologize for the confusion," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Layla gave a small nod, her expression still cool and composed. "It's not about the apology, Patricia," she said. "It's about understanding the bigger picture. I'll be taking a seat in first class now, and I expect a complete review of the situation. I want a report on my desk by the time I land in San Francisco. This is not just about one seat, one incident. This is about the culture within this airline, and it needs to change." Patricia nodded, looking somewhat defeated. "Yes, Miss Thompson, I'll take care of it right away." Layla watched her leave, the tension in the air still thick. But now there was a shift, a moment of realization for everyone involved. This wasn't just a moment of personal inconvenience for Layla. This was a turning point, a reminder that people like Patricia and Kevin weren't in control anymore. The rules had changed, and Layla Thompson, CEO of Green Tech Solutions and the new owner of Global Air Partners, was now in charge. As Layla walked toward the first-class boarding gate, she felt the weight of that power settle in her chest. This wasn't just about taking a seat on a plane. It was about taking her place in an industry that had always looked at people like her as outsiders. But now, she was inside, and she wasn't leaving anytime soon. Layla Thompson sat in her office, staring out the large glass window that framed the sprawling cityscape of San Francisco. The skyline was bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun, and as the city shifted from day to night, so did her thoughts. She had been through a lot in the past few days, more than most would encounter in a lifetime. The events at the airport had set something in motion, something far greater than just a flight mishap. And now, it was time to make a decision that would reverberate across the entire airline. The incident with the staff, the bias, the subtle discrimination, it had all hit too close to home. Layla had spent years fighting for a seat at the table, fighting for respect, for fairness, for equity. And now she was facing the reality that even with all of her success, even with all the power she wielded, the world, particularly corporate spaces, was still biased, still entrenched in outdated notions of privilege and power. But Layla was no stranger to adversity. She had never been one to back down. If anything, she thrived in the face of challenges. This wasn't just a personal affront. It was a systemic problem that needed to be addressed, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been treated like an outsider, like they didn't belong. The idea of firing everyone, the gate agent, Patricia Walker, Kevin, the check-in agent, and the rest of the crew, crossed her mind, but something in her gut told her that this wasn't the solution. It was tempting to assert her power by removing the immediate obstacles, but Layla knew that simply punishing the individuals involved wouldn't solve the deeper issue. The problem wasn't just with the individuals, it was with the culture, the way things had always been done. If she fired the crew, the cycle would continue. The bias would simply be passed on to someone else and the system would remain unchanged. No, Layla thought to herself, she needed to do something bigger. She needed to change the culture. She pulled out her tablet and began drafting the outline for the reforms she was going to implement. She was a strategist, after all, and her ability to see the big picture had always been one of her strongest qualities. This wasn't just about fixing one incident. It was about reshaping the very foundation of how global air partners operated. The first step was clear: anti-bias training for every single employee. Layla had worked hard to build green tech solutions into a company that valued diversity, fairness, and inclusion, and she knew that the same values needed to be instilled at global air partners. But it wasn't enough to just talk about these values. They had to be put into practice at every level of the company, from the flight crew to the executives. She made a note to herself to reach out to experts in the field of diversity and inclusion, consultants who could help create a program that went beyond surface-level awareness. She wanted something that would truly change the way employees thought about their roles, the way they interacted with passengers, and most importantly, the way they saw themselves in relation to others. This wasn't going to be a one-time training session that employees could breeze through. This had to be an ongoing commitment, a continuous learning process that would hold everyone accountable. But Layla knew that training alone wasn't enough. The company's policies also needed to change. She thought about how passengers were treated, not just at the gate, but throughout the entire experience. From check-in to boarding to in-flight service, there was a clear divide between those in first class and those in economy, a divide that was as much about race and class as it was about the ticket price. She scribbled down more notes, her mind racing. Transparency, accountability, fairness. These were the pillars she wanted to build the company's new culture on. She wanted to ensure that every decision made, whether it was about seating assignments, customer service, or promotions, was open, transparent, and fair. There could be no more assumptions about who belonged where based on appearances. Every passenger, regardless of their race, gender, or social status, should receive the same level of respect and service. Layla's thoughts turned back to the staff involved in the incident. Patricia Walker, the senior cabin manager, had been with the airline for nearly 3 decades, and while her initial reaction had been less than ideal, Layla could see potential in her. Patricia wasn't just an obstacle, she was a product of the system. She had internalized biases over the years, but that didn't mean she couldn't change. Layla knew that it would take time, but with the right guidance, Patricia could become an ally in the fight for change. It was Michael Harris, the flight attendant who had quietly filed complaints in the past, who gave Layla hope. Michael had already demonstrated the courage to stand up, even in the face of an indifferent system. He had felt the sting of discrimination himself, and instead of accepting it, he had pushed back. Layla knew that someone like Michael would be an invaluable asset in the reform process. She decided then and there to promote him to head the company's newly formed ethics committee. His first-hand experience would help him lead the charge in ensuring that the company lived up to its commitment to equality. Layla leaned back in her chair, her mind running through the details of the plan she was putting in place. She wasn't just going to fix the immediate issue. She was going to transform Global Air Partners into a company that other businesses could look to as a model for inclusivity and fairness. The airline industry, like many others, had been built on systems of exclusion and hierarchy. But that could change. Layla knew it had to. Later that afternoon, Layla called a meeting with the senior leadership team. It was time to take action. "Thank you all for joining me today," Layla began as the executives filed into the conference room. "As you all know, there was an incident at the airport that highlighted some deep-rooted issues within our company, This is not just about one incident. This is about the culture we've created here. It's about the assumptions we make about people based on their appearance. It's about how we've allowed biases to shape how we treat others, particularly our passengers. Layla paused and looked around the room. She could see the unease in some of their faces, the discomfort at having their complicity called into question. But Layla wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make a difference. "We are implementing comprehensive reforms," Layla continued. "First and foremost, we are rolling out mandatory anti-bias training for every employee. No one is exempt, from the gate agents to the flight attendants to the executives sitting in this room. We will ensure that every person in this company understands the impact of their actions and words, and how those actions can affect not only our passengers but also our reputation as a company." She moved to the next part of her plan. "We are also overhauling how we evaluate our employees. No longer will our performance metrics focus solely on numbers and efficiency. From now on, we will evaluate leadership, ethics, and the ability to demonstrate respect and fairness in every interaction. Those who demonstrate a commitment to these values will be promoted. Those who resist this change will not have a place in this company." Layla could feel the weight of her words sink in. There was no going back now. She wasn't just leading a company, she was leading a revolution in corporate culture. This was bigger than her. It was bigger than any individual. This was about creating a future where people were judged by their character, not their appearance or their background. "I expect full cooperation from all of you," Layla said, her voice firm. "The changes we are making will be difficult, but they are necessary. We will become a company where every employee, regardless of their position, is held accountable for their actions. We will treat every passenger with the dignity and respect they deserve, and we will not tolerate anything less. This is the new standard for global air partners." As the meeting came to a close, Layla felt a sense of resolve settle in her chest. This was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but Layla was ready. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a world where fairness and equality weren't the exception. They were the rule. Layla Thompson wasn't just making decisions. She was making history, and she knew that the ripples of change she was creating would be felt far beyond the walls of global air partners. The meeting was set. The small conference room inside the airline's operations headquarters felt like the calm before a storm, with its sleek wooden table and glass windows overlooking the runway. But inside, the tension was palpable. Layla Thompson, the newly minted owner of Global Air Partners, was about to address the team that had just been caught in her whirlwind. She wasn't a stranger to boardrooms or tense negotiations, but today felt different. She had fought for every inch of success, and now she was going to ensure that others in this room understood what it meant to be in a position of true leadership. She stood at the head of the table, tall and composed, a calm contrast to the group of airline executives and staff members seated around her. Patricia Walker, the senior cabin manager, was there, her posture tight, her expression still carrying the weight of their previous confrontation. Kevin, the check-in agent who had initially tried to dismiss Layla in the terminal, sat beside her, looking equally uneasy. Other key employees from the flight crew, including Michael Harris, a flight attendant who had raised internal complaints about discriminatory practices, were present as well. The air was thick with anticipation. Layla knew this was a critical moment, not just for her, but for everyone in the room. This meeting wasn't just about holding people accountable, it was about setting the stage for a transformative culture. She needed these employees to understand that their actions would have consequences, but those consequences could also be the beginning of something greater. This was about creating an environment where respect, ethics, and leadership could thrive. "I'm glad you all could join me," Layla began, her voice steady and commanding. "We're here because what happened yesterday wasn't just an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem, a systemic issue that affects how we do business, how we treat each other, and how we treat our passengers." She paused, scanning the room. No one moved. Even Michael Harris, who had shown a willingness to challenge the system internally, remained silent, his hands folded in front of him. Layla continued, her tone now more deliberate. "Yesterday's events were the breaking point for me, not because of a misplaced seat assignment, but because I saw how deeply ingrained the bias is within the culture here. This wasn't about a mistake. This was about treating someone differently because of how they look, because of preconceived notions about who belongs where." She let the words hang in the air for a moment, letting them sink in. Patricia shifted in her seat, her discomfort evident. Kevin kept his eyes on the table, unwilling to meet Layla's gaze. But Michael, who had been quiet up until that point, cleared his throat and spoke up. "Miss Thompson, I want to apologize for my role in what happened," Michael said, his voice calm but with a note of sincerity. "I've seen this happen before, passengers being treated differently based on how they look, what they're wearing, or even their demeanor. It's not right, and I regret that I didn't speak up sooner." Layla looked at him, appreciating his honesty. "Michael, I respect your candor," she replied. "And I'm glad you're here today, ready to make a change. It's not easy to admit mistakes, especially when it feels like the system is rigged against you. But that's the first step. The next step is to be part of the solution." She turned her attention to the rest of the room. "I'm not here to punish anyone, but I am here to make it clear that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Not under my leadership. We have the power to change this company from the ground up, and that change starts now." Layla's words resonated with some of the employees. Patricia, for one, looked visibly uncomfortable but remained silent, her eyes darting between the others in the room. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed lost in thought, his earlier confidence shaken by the weight of Layla's presence. "I've decided to make some immediate changes," Layla continued, her voice unwavering. "First, we need to implement a company-wide ethics and anti-bias training program. This isn't just about teaching employees not to judge based on appearance. This is about reevaluating how we make decisions, how we assess people, and how we hold ourselves accountable." She paused, letting the words settle. "But this is just the beginning. I'm promoting those who have shown the courage to speak up, who have demonstrated strong ethical leadership. Michael, you've filed internal complaints, and you've consistently shown integrity, even when it wasn't easy. I'm promoting you to head our new ethics committee. You'll be responsible for leading the charge on implementing these reforms." Michael's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly recovered, nodding in gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Thompson. I won't let you down." Layla smiled, appreciative of his response. "I know you won't. I'm counting on you to help reshape the way we do things here." Turning to the rest of the team, Layla's gaze became more intense. "For the rest of you, this is your chance to step up. This company is going through a transformation, and those who show the commitment to ethical behavior, to fairness, and to leadership will be rewarded. But those who resist change, who cling to outdated attitudes, will be left behind." Patricia, clearly uneasy, finally spoke up. "I understand what you're saying, Miss Thompson, but this is going to be a huge shift. It's not going to be easy to change the culture here, especially when people have been doing things a certain way for so long." Layla met Patricia's gaze directly. "I'm aware of that. Change never is easy, but that doesn't mean it's not necessary. This isn't just about one incident. This is about creating an environment where everyone, regardless of their background, feels they belong. Where leadership isn't about who can smile the best or follow the rules the longest. It's about who can make decisions that are just, who can challenge the status quo, and who can lead with integrity. Layla let that last statement sit in the air for a moment, her eyes moving from person to person around the table. She could see the doubt in some faces, the skepticism in others. But she also saw something else, the flicker of realization that things were about to change, and they would either be a part of that change or risk being left behind. "I'm restructuring the way we evaluate employees," Layla said. "Performance metrics won't just be about the numbers. They'll be about leadership, ethics, and how we treat each other. The days of rewarding people simply for following the rules without question are over. We're building a company where true leadership and moral courage will drive success." She paused, her gaze lingering on each individual in the room. "This isn't just about us. It's about the future of this airline. It's about how we want to be remembered, how we want our passengers to feel when they fly with us. We're not just a company, we're a community. And that community will be built on the values of respect, fairness, and inclusion." Layla's words had an effect. She could see the tension in the room begin to shift, the resistance slowly giving way to understanding. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. Layla had no doubt about that. As the meeting continued, Layla focused on outlining the next steps for the team, emphasizing the importance of communication, accountability, and continuous improvement. She knew that this was just the first step in a much longer journey, but it was a journey she was ready to lead. When the meeting finally concluded, Layla stood up, her confidence unwavering. "Thank you all for being here today," she said. "I'll be expecting updates on these changes soon. Let's make this company something we can all be proud of." As she left the room, Layla felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The ripple effect of her words had begun, and she knew that change was coming. It was no longer just a dream, it was a reality. And Layla Thompson was at the center of it. The weeks following the meeting in the conference room were a whirlwind for Layla Thompson. The decision to address the systemic issues within Global Air Partners had been bold, but it was just the beginning of a far-reaching transformation. As she navigated the challenges of owning an airline, her leadership was tested at every turn. But with each obstacle came a reaffirmation of her belief in the power of ethical leadership, accountability, and inclusion. Layla had already set the wheels in motion for a broader cultural shift, one that would affect not just how passengers were treated, but how the company treated its own employees. The implementation of anti-bias and ethics training had begun in full force, with mandatory sessions for all staff, from the flight attendants to the highest-level executives. No one was exempt from this new way of thinking. Layla knew that changing the company's culture meant changing how its people interacted with each other and the world outside. It was about creating an environment where fairness wasn't just a policy, it was a core value. As the new systems took shape, Layla saw the ripple effect of her actions starting to unfold. Employees who had once been hesitant about the changes were now engaging in open dialogue, sharing their thoughts on how to create a more inclusive and transparent workplace. Michael Harris, the newly appointed head of the Ethics Committee, had been instrumental in pushing forward the reform efforts. His own experiences had given him a unique perspective on what it meant to challenge the system, and he became a driving force behind the changes. Under his leadership, the Ethics Committee began investigating complaints more thoroughly, creating a culture of accountability where no wrongdoing could go unchecked. But it wasn't just the employees who were feeling the shift. Layla began receiving feedback from passengers who had flown with Global Air Partners before and after the changes were implemented. The difference in their experiences was striking. What had once been a company that silently allowed discriminatory practices to go unnoticed was now becoming known for its commitment to fairness, equality, and respect for all passengers, regardless of their race, gender, or social standing. Layla's impact extended beyond corporate boundaries. As the media began picking up on the changes at Global Air Partners, the story of the Black CEO who had turned a problematic airline into a beacon of inclusivity resonated with people all over the world. Layla had never set out to be a symbol of change. She had just wanted to make things right. But as her story spread, it became clear that she was inspiring others to question the systems that perpetuated discrimination in their own industries. The conversation about racial and gender equality, about the treatment of marginalized groups in corporate spaces, was growing louder. Layla had made sure of that. However, not everyone was thrilled with the rapid transformation. There were still those within the company who clung to the old ways, who resented the new policies and the spotlight they brought. Layla knew that resistance to change was inevitable, but she wasn't about to back down. In her experience, those who resisted change were often the ones who were most threatened by it, the ones who stood to lose power if the system was reshaped. Layla had faced that kind of resistance before. But now, as the CEO of an airline that was beginning to take its first steps into a new era, she wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for a better future for everyone who had ever been overlooked, undervalued, or marginalized. And it wasn't just about making the airline more inclusive. It was about sending a message to the entire industry that things could be different, that the very systems that had long upheld inequality could be dismantled, one decision at a time. Layla was building a new blueprint for leadership, one where ethics, fairness, and respect weren't just buzzwords. They were the foundation upon which everything was built. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly reports in her office, Layla received an email from the board of directors. They had scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the company since the acquisition and the cultural changes that had been implemented. Layla knew that the board would have a lot of questions, but she also knew that the results spoke for themselves. The airline was seeing not just financial growth, but an improvement in employee morale and customer satisfaction. It was a testament to what could happen when leadership truly listened to its people and put values at the center of its business strategy. When the meeting with the board finally came, Layla walked in with confidence. The room was filled with executives and investors who had initially been skeptical about her ability to transform the company. But as Layla stood before them, she could see a shift in their demeanor. They were no longer questioning her methods. They were eager to hear what she had to say next. "Layla, we have to admit," one of the board members began, "we were skeptical at first about the changes you were implementing. But the numbers don't lie. The company's performance has improved, and the media attention around your leadership has been overwhelmingly positive. Can you tell us more about your vision for the future of Global Air Partners?" Layla smiled, but her answer was straightforward. "This isn't just about financial success," she said. "This is about building a company that reflects the values of fairness and respect. We're not just transforming how we do business, we're changing what business stands for. Our passengers deserve to feel valued, no matter who they are. Our employees deserve to work in an environment where they're treated with dignity, not judged by their appearance or background. This is the future I envision for Global Air Partners, and it's a future that I believe will set us apart in an industry that has a long way to go in terms of inclusivity." The board members nodded in agreement, some of them even exchanging approving glances. It was clear that Layla had not only proven her critics wrong, but had also managed to inspire the very people who had initially doubted her vision. Later that evening, as Layla sat in her office, reflecting on the day's events, she thought about how far she had come. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the many times she had questioned whether the fight for equality would ever truly be won. But in that moment, she realized that change wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process, one step at a time. Her fight was far from over. She had made progress, but there was still much to be done. There would always be more battles to fight, more systems to challenge. But Layla knew that she was no longer just a leader in name, she was a leader in action. She had shown the world what it meant to stand firm, to use power for good, and to lead with integrity. And in doing so, she had not only changed the course of one airline's future, but had paved the way for a new standard of leadership across industries. Layla's story was just beginning, and the lessons she had learned along the way about power, perseverance, and the importance of fighting for equality would continue to guide her as she worked toward a future where all people, regardless of their race or social standing, could be treated with the dignity they deserved. In the end, Layla Thompson wasn't just transforming an airline, she was transforming an entire industry. And that, she knew, was just the beginning.